Hello and welcome to the Hoodcast. I am streaming once again from the Hood compound in parts unknown. I am joined today by a comedian, metal fan, and all-round good chap, Rob Saunders. Rob, thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
I'll just right off the bat, comedy is a very interesting manifestation of expressing your everyone's particular mental illnesses and personality defects. So I'm just wondering quickly how you got into it and why.
Well, I mean, I've always loved comedy since I was like a little kid, like young. I've always loved it. And I remember my dad gave me all the Goons tape, like shows on tape, and I should just listen to them religiously and just always loved comedy. And it was always something I wanted to do was stand up. It just seemed, when I was younger, when I was a teenager and stuff, it just seemed like an impossible thing. Like, how would that even be a thing you could do? And then just over 11 years ago, I was ill for a bit and I had to give up work, and I was, and I just had this mindset of fuck it, I'm just going to go and do it. I'm just going to do, even if I do just an open mic set, 5 minutes, and I die on my arse. At least I've done it once. And that was about 10 years ago. I did that, and I sort of haven't looked back since. Really, I sort of do it on and off, and I'm not the most prolific with stand up, but I do it when I can.
Yeah, I find that especially when you're not making fees from it, especially not consistently, that you can't really commit yourself to it too much. And comedian I admire, Pope Lonergan, I don't know whether you're familiar with his work.
Yeah.
But he's saying about how there's kind of a two-tier system for comedy, in that a lot of people who have pretty minted parents or then have the opportunity to plough money into their show, afford courses, and obviously spend a lot more time networking with the right industry people, or sometimes they even have an in. And then there's kind of the rest of us who have to do normal human jobs and then try and get gigs if and when they can.
Yeah, no, that is definitely true. I think the Edinburgh Festival was a good signifier of that, just to see how the sort of act doing fringe shows and stuff is mostly middle class, upper class people who again can afford to just spunk a lot of money on going to the Edinburgh Fringe for a month. I've been fortunate enough to go up to the Fringe and do shows up there but we do it as a group, like a few of us, and we do the free Fringe. So we do it as cheaply as we can, but it still ends up costing us money. When you see acts doing their solo shows and, spending thousands of pounds for advertising, and it moves the goalposts a bit, doesn't it? It's sort of it's a bit unfair for people that can't really afford all that.
And it kind of creates a system where obviously you think of mediums like comedy as kind of like a class. You can fantasize about it, especially with the very rich history of working class comics. You can really fantasize about it being some sort of class equalizer where you succeed entirely on merit, but that really isn't the case, and you end up with a lot of comics really being unfairly shut out, or having to run twice as hard to cover half the distance due to economic factors beyond their control.
Not just economic, really. I think there's lots of factors that will affect that, I think. And again, I'm in a position where I'm, a straight white cisgendered man. I'm just not rich. You know what I mean? I'm already I'm already a few steps up the ladder than a lot of people who do stand up. So I find it hard to complain about it. But I totally agree with what you're saying, though. There is definitely an imbalance.
Yeah, I think there's a really important to kind of acknowledge where you're lucky, because I've got the most of that the same as you, but with the big orts, obviously. But still, I've been told I pass as one of the neurotypicals. So if I didn't open my mouth about it, I'd just be fine. So it's kind of interesting to really talk about the way privilege and those other social factors, and then economic and class factors, impact on your ability to succeed. And then there's, I think, the third thing, which is obviously there's nepotism and networking in everywhere, but I think because you have a lot of the same kind of tastemakers, you have a lot of people, kind of the same people, deciding who gets the TV spots, who gets the big pushes almost. So
Yeah.
do you think there's a danger of the scene remaining quite homogenized almost?
Possibly. I think the way people make and consume comedy is very different now, though, isn't it? So especially at the minute with lockdown and stuff, I think it's going to show that people can make literally anyone. If again there is an economic factor, I guess if you've got a phone, you can record something and put it out within an hour.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that and you can gain a following doing that if you're lucky. And again, there are factors about paying for advertising and being able to afford the equipment to do it. But it's not like it used to be. Even when I started doing stand-up, a podcast wasn't, a thing, really. I think they were new. I think Ricky Gervais did a big one, didn't he, when they first started? And then, but I wouldn't have been able to consider the idea of doing a podcast with people and putting it out. But now I do that.
Yeah, I think podcasting, as I've talked about with my girlfriend, represents kind of another boom period in radio as a medium, because social media can be a benefit in terms of, obviously, it works better if you already have money to plow into adverts and all of that. Although I'm not entirely convinced about how successful advertising can be.
I think unless it's done with a lot of money, then I think it's sort of one of those things where if you drip money into it, it's not going to do much. And it's one of those things where I think internet advertising and social media advertising, to do it properly, it costs a lot of money, which normal people can't do.
Yeah, and you have to properly spunk it rather than drip feed it, don't you?
Yeah.
And especially now that social media, because I think in the last couple of years, especially, I've noticed that the adverts have gotten a lot more prevalent and obnoxious and invasive. You get them in the sort of Snapchat style Facebook story feed. You get them when you scroll the timeline. You get them when you scroll Instagram. Even when I'm on fucking Duolingo trying to learn German, I get the adverts for the worst looking mobile games of all time.
Adverts in German. The adverts in German, because then you could just say it's another part of the learning.
No, it's sadly not. It would make more sense if you're learning German, but I suppose they want you to actually pay attention to the advert. I mean, there's the old cliche, anything to do with comedy and entertainment. If you want to make a small fortune in them, you've got to start off with a large fortune.
Yes, yeah. But then I also think if you're going into it to make a fortune, is probably the wrong area to go into, really. I think anything artistic, you shouldn't go into it with that mindset, really, I think.
Yeah, because even bands that play huge, comedians who do pretty well, but don't get as much as people probably think that they do, especially after taxes and life expenses. I'm not personally one to complain about tax, because I'd rather that than people people go bankrupt for making the selfish life decision of getting cancer, or
how dare they?
Yeah, fucking rude, isn't it? And John Green, who writes very, very terrible teen books, like The Fault in Our Stars.
All right, yeah.
And all of that kind of stuff. He had a very good quote, was like, I don't have children, but I don't mind paying taxes for education because I don't want to be in a country full of stupid people.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's sort of it is simple at that to an extent, isn't it? And also, I just think it's just common decency, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's just sort of like just because I don't have kids doesn't mean I don't want kids to like be educated.
Exactly. From a rational self-interest standpoint, which we can talk about that as a theory, but I'd rather not get into it because I want to keep my blood pressure down today. But
fair enough.
But you can say, like, look, more educated people get better jobs, pay more taxes, less likely to commit crime, safer neighborhoods. But you could just also, like, I think maybe people have to have a fundamental right to follow their dreams and aspirations.
Yeah. Well, education in general, be it like what some might call like frivolous education, and like stuff that isn't necessarily like vocational, is just good for society. The more people know, the better.
Yeah, and especially since all of those kind of deemed frivolous things, it's just like, no, we just want everyone to become mathematicians or engineers or scientists. But the thing is, life would be very, very boring and dull without the creative industry. And especially since, even though there have been loads of cuts to those industries, or in terms of public funding, I've seen statistics for every £1 you invest in the creative industry, you get £3 worth back in profit. And I'm not an investment expert, but that sounds like a pretty fucking good deal to me.
It seems like a good deal. I could get involved in that.
Yeah. And when you see kind of like even bands like, have you heard of Code Orange and While She Sleeps?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm big fans of both of them, especially Code Orange's new album Underneath. I think it's the best album released this year so far. I know that's a bold statement, but it's
I'm not very up to date with music. I don't know. I wouldn't even know what albums have come out this year. So
yeah, Testament have released a new good album.
All right.
Yeah, it's probably one of the best ones they've done in years. I forgot the name of it. Silosis have released a very good new album called Cycle of Suffering. Underneath by Code Orange is very good.
I've heard good things about that Code Orange album. I've not listened to it, but I've heard like a lot of people raving about it.
Yeah, it genuinely is that good. I mean, a lot of times, especially the music industry, with new bands, I feel like because you have a lot of the giant bands that can sell out arenas and headline festivals consistently. Like obviously Sabbath have retired and Motorhead have unfortunately because of Lemmy's passing, but your Iron Maidens, your Metallicas, your Rammsteins. Like Rammstein have said they're only going to be about for one more album. System of a Down haven't released new music in ages. Same with Rage Against the Machine. And Iron Maiden and Metallica aren't going to be about forever. And like the only newer band comparable to their sort of level, I'd say, is Slipknot and Avenged Sevenfold. But they're still quite old. They're not as older bands, but they're still older bands. So I think the industry is kind of very desperate to move bands up to that standard.
Well, I think, I think, like I was saying about comedy and stuff, I think how people consume music and how people buy music is just different now.
Yeah.
And I don't think you'll ever get a ginormous band or act ever again, like someone that's huge, just because. When I was younger, you could only really discover bands by reading music magazines or like just picking up a cool-looking album cover in a record shop. But now, if I was 15 now getting into like heavy metal music, I could say, okay, I really like Code Orange. What other bands like I like Code Orange? I could just type that onto Google and then find, myriad bands that I could just click on and listen to music. Whereas before, you'd spend 15 quid on an album that might be terrible. You just buy it just because you have
to take a punt, don't you?
Yeah, and now it's sort of people are, and again, if a younger person can, instead of being like discovering a new band that everyone loves, they can say, okay, well, I like Code Orange, but then they could get into Slipknot, who are a bit older. Then they could get into, I don't know, Metallica, and then get into like, you know, Black Sabbath. And then, whereas before it was almost like a younger people listen to music from their era. Now younger people just listen to music from every time.
I think people are generally better informed and empowered to consume music, and obviously piracy, you know, has a lot of people do pirate music. It's because, you know, a lot of people's money is tight, and I know 10 to 12 quid for a new album doesn't seem like much, 15 for the deluxe edition, but when you factor in how many albums you buy if you're a big fan, and then gigs and merch, it does add up when you're not on not on that good an income.
Yeah, but pirating music, I don't think is a new thing, really. You know, I used to record tapes. I used to get CDs out from the library and record them on tape. Well, most of my collection back then was just tape from albums I borrowed from the library. You know, and
and then you burn CDs, and now
exactly.
And then now you've got YouTube,
the amount of CDRs I used to have of just like albums, just CDRs, just like
I just think like finding new bands, pirating stuff has just gotten easier.
Yeah.
And I think when incomes are tight, it is harder for new bands to get anywhere. Because I've seen with Code Orange on, he was on the lead singer Jamie Morgan was on the Electric Theatre podcast with Clown from Slipknot, and he was saying that they've never really made any money. They don't make fuck all. And While She Sleeps, in the promo for their latest album, they famously put out like, "Oh, this advertising cost us all like a month's rent, and we'd need this many streams on Spotify or album sales to get it back." Like really putting into stark terms.
Yeah, it's sort of a strange way to advertise. It's a bit, I don't know, I think because a lot of the music I like, again, I like all sorts of music, not just metal. I listen to like lots of different stuff. But most of it is very like I very rarely go to like big gigs and stuff. It's normally like, you know, DIY gigs in like anywhere, you know, it's just like small little, like in front of like 20, 50 people, you know. And
is there any particular reason for that, or
just because the sort of music I like is generally that anyway? But also, I don't know. I've never really felt that comfortable at big like festivals and big arena gigs and stuff. They're just, especially the big arena gigs and stuff. You may as well just be watching them on telly. I think there's no real atmosphere there. I saw Iron Maiden a few years ago because I love Iron Maiden, and I've never seen them before because I don't go to those sort of gigs. So I went to see them at the O2, and that was amazing because they're a band that fills a stadium, you know.
Yeah, and they really fit with the whole pomp and circumstance of it.
You know, I wouldn't want to see that show in a small venue, but like the majority, you know, bands like Metallica. Yeah, exactly. Well, bands like Metallica, for example, like thrash metal, for me, doesn't suit an arena. For like thrash, you want it to be up close, personal, sweaty. It's fast, like music. It's fast, like mosh music, basically, isn't it? You know, it's not like stadium music. I know Metallica, obviously, their latest stuff is stadium music, but yeah.
But they still produced some very, very good thrash albums. And then I think I'm not one of these metal fans who really slate the Black Album. I really enjoy a lot of it.
The Black Album was like one of the first metal albums I really got into, really. So I have a soft spot for the Black Album. And there's actually some amazing songs on the Black Album. It is a proper, like, got like bangers on it. And that's, again, still quite thrashy as well, I think, the Black Album. It's got some like, thrashes on there.
Yes, it's only after that, really, when you get Load and Reload, where they started to kind of, Lars started to disappear up his own arse, you know?
Yeah. Have you ever seen Some Kind of Monster?
No, but I've heard about it.
Oh, you should. That is a hard recommendation. I think it's on Netflix. If you have Netflix, watch it on there because it's phenomenal. It's because most, like, when you get a like an album making of documentary, it's normally about like the band's most popular or like most famous album. This is them making St. Anger.
The second the worst one they've done. The worst one.
Yeah, I think it probably is the worst one. But like, it's something fascinating about watching, because it was literally just after Jason Newsted left, and yeah, it's a fascinating film, and it's hilarious. And again, I have a soft spot for Metallica because, like, you know, they're one of the first metal bands I ever got into, but like, they are ridiculous as people. But I think if you're that rich, you are generally going to turn ridiculous, right?
Yeah, you're gonna go a bit insane with it, and then
Kirk,
you start.
Kirk Hammett seems straight down the line. To be fair, maybe James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, I think, are a bit insane.
They're two very big egos, aren't they?
Yeah, there's a really telling.
James especially has certainly got his demons.
Yeah, there's a really telling scene in that Some Kind of Monster where like James and Lars are like having a massive argument. And then he's saying to him, "I just don't feel like you're listening to me. Like, you don't feel like you're listening to my ideas." And then Kirk Hammett just pops up and says, "Well, that's what I felt like for the last 30 years." And they both just ignore him.
Yeah.
We carry on arguing amongst themselves. It's amazing. I can't recommend that film enough.
At some point, like, you must disconnect from it as Kirk Hammett. Like, he seems like him and Rob seem like relatively normal human beings. Like, Kirk's like kind of seems like the intermediary agony aunt of like, I've dealt with these people for long enough that it's just water off a duck's back, and Rob just sort of seems like, I'm just happy to be there.
Really. Well, he's probably been there quite a long time, isn't he? But you know, he's like the newest one, isn't he?
Yeah. And on their latest album, because I don't count Lulu as a Metallica album, it's a Lou Reed album with Metallica Reed, as a backing band, you know?
Yeah.
It's
an interesting one, that.
And it's also too funny, like, to be bad, to be, like, offensively bad. I consider it like The Room of bad albums, you know? the Tommy Wiseau film.
Yeah, I get that. I don't think I've listened to that album all the way through. I mean, I don't really listen to newer Metallica anyway. It doesn't really appeal. But I think I've heard a few tracks from that Lou Reed Metallica like thing. It's not for me, but I don't think it's for many people, is it really?
Yeah.
What is that for? It's not really for Metallica fans. It's not really for Lou Reed fans, is it? I think it is just for Metallica and Lou Reed, and that is it.
Yeah, it's just for just for them. I've never, apart from this really weird avant-garde pretentious website, I've never seen a positive review for it. But you do get a bit of a giggle hearing James Hetfield singing "I Am the Table." Of course you do.
Well, he's never been the best with lyrics anyway, has he really, James Hetfield? I don't think he wrote the lyrics for that anyway. I think that's Lou Reed. But like, he's not really the best lyricist, is he?
No, I think you go to. I think I've always thought Iron Maiden, because they're the two biggest metal bands of all time. I've always thought Iron Maiden had better, more intricate lyrics, and Metallica had a bit more of a and a bit more pomp and circumstance. Whereas Metallica are a bit more kind of like in your face, kind of aggressive, you know.
Yeah. Well, like Iron Maiden stuff, it's always like. There's like history in there and stuff, isn't there? And they're always a bit more like grand and like stories, aren't they? Of Maiden songs, and you know, a lot of it anyway.
Yeah, it's a sort of difference between. I think it's a difference between reading the book and watching the TV show almost. Not that Iron Maiden don't do amazing live shows, but you get what I mean.
Good analogy, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and it just the thing circling back to arenas and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I like download for the camaraderie and meeting new people and chatting, and you get to see for a reasonable price. You get to see like loads of really good bands, and I found
I've been to download once. When was that? 2005, maybe a long time ago. Yeah.
I think it's nice just to get to go a couple times to get a load of bands off your bucket list, like. Yeah. The last download that ran, Tool and Slipknot were there, and I love Slipknot, and I never thought I'd get the opportunity to see Tool, so I sort of had to.
Yeah. They're very both like ridiculously good live bands. I've seen Slipknot quite a few times, and I've seen Tool once. I saw them And that was one of the big another arena gig I went to. I saw them at Nottingham Arena over 10 years ago. It was when the album Before Last came out. Was it? I can't remember what it's called. 10,000 Days.
10,000 Days, yeah.
Yeah, it was when that album came out. They toured with that. It was them and Mastodon. So that was a good gig. Yeah.
Ooh, love Mastodon too. That's the first. No, not the first. The first live gig I went to was Funeral for a Friend, but Mastodon was the second one, and the first one I probably got into.
Yeah, who was where was the Mastodon gig?
It was at the LCR in Norwich, UEA.
Oh, nice. Oh, cool.
Oh, they love it there. They've seen them there 3 times. It's really
nice.
Yeah. The last time they played, they had Scott Kelly from Neurosis.
Oh, so Neurosis is one of my favourite bands. Yeah, one of my favourite bands.
They played every song that they've ever written with him because they usually do 1 or 2 songs on each album where he guests. And that was really, really fun.
Yeah, God, I bet that was good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been to Mastodon a few times. I saw them, years ago, supporting. They were opening for Slayer and Slipknot.
That's strong.
Yeah, it was a pretty good gig. It was Mastodon on first, then Hatebreed, then Slayer, then Slipknot. Yeah,
that's pretty naughty. and that suits. I think medium arenas like LCR, I have a lot of fun in when I go. Brixton Academy, I think, is one of my favourite venues because it's big, but it's not too big.
I was at Brixton Academy to see Mastodon, actually.
Yeah, I went to see. I saw Bullet for My Valentine and Killswitch there, and I'm not big on Bullet for My Valentine now as much. I like their older stuff, but they're more on the poppy end of the metal stuff.
I don't really know their stuff, really. I think it's a bit after my time. Bullet for My Valentine.
Killswitch were a lot of fun.
Yeah, they're like I don't know if they'd be a guilty pleasure. I don't know, but I like Killswitch Engage are one of those bands that I really enjoy. Again, they're like I was saying about they're almost like a stadium band, really. Like the stuff they write is like it's crowd pleasing stadium fillers. I don't know if they play stadiums, but they could, I think, with the songs they write.
Yeah, it's designed for it, and I've seen them at bigger venues where they just crush it with bangers. I think they could, but they're not as big in Europe as they are in America. I think that's the thing.
So if that metalcore sort of thing is still big, I don't really know what's like big in metal anymore, really. But I remember that sort of stuff was like the hot thing, really. It was that sort of like metalcore stuff.
Well, people are defining it as kind of post-hardcore or post-metalcore. And a lot of it kind of became very much cookie cutter, where you'd have really down-tuned riffs with the screams, and then you'd have the clean vocal chorus, and then people would start fucking about with electronics and keyboards, but not do it very well. But then you had people who could manage it, like Architects and Code Orange and While She Sleeps, Parkway, who can incorporate that in a sort of atmospheric way. And it's very clearly influenced by the keyboard bits in Rammstein or 9 Inch Nails, and it works a lot better. And there's a lot of ambient stuff. I don't know any of those
bands you just mentioned, so I obviously know who 9 Inch Nails and Rammstein are, but the other bands I don't know who any of those are. So other than Code Orange, but
yeah, they're worth your time. But I like festival gigs, but I'm not a big fan of arenas. I've had great times at arenas where it's the first time I saw Sevenfold. That was fun. Seen System of a Down on their Armenian Genocide Awareness Tour, Wake Up the Souls. That was really special. And seeing Slipknot was fun. But the last time I saw Slipknot, the last gig I went to was when they were touring in January, February time. I went to Sheffield because it was a lot cheaper than London, with the tube.
Yeah.
And I think Sheffield, the air was breathable, which was nice.
So not a welcome change, isn't it?
Yeah. And it was kind of like an old hockey arena, and we were sitting at the back. Their support band was Behemoth, and we were sitting down kind of relaxed, and it was Behemoth playing like proper black metal, and then Slipknot, and we were sitting along, and I didn't really pay attention to the people on the floor, but it kind of felt like I am way too relaxed and calm, just watching
Yeah.
these really, really heavy bands.
Yeah.
And I felt kind of disconnected from it. I felt like sort of like I was just watching it in my living room.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The older I get, though, the more I appreciate a seat at a gig, though. Like,
oh yeah, I hate standing. I hate standing. I hate getting nudged. I'm not.
Yeah, and I hate the sort of assumption that like if you're at the front, this happens quite at smaller gigs. I find quite a lot where like if you're at the front enjoying a band, especially if it's like a really like heavy like thrashing sort of band, people just assume that you'll want to like start moshing. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm just enjoying it. Just let me. You can mosh, have fun, fill your boots. But I just want to stand here and watch. I don't really. I'm not. I'm too old for all the moshing stuff anymore.
I just want a good fucking view.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always get it because I'm about average height. I'm only like 5'8", so, and I always get it where the tallest fucking 6'6" long-haired cunt stands right in front of me, and I can barely see anything.
Yeah, and they're whipping their hair about, so you get whipped with their hair. Their greasy, sweaty hair. Yeah.
Yeah, you get the taste of grease and overpriced lager in your mouth.
You get some sweaty dreadlock in your.
Yeah, and I understand getting a bit sweaty after a gig, but they come into the gig smelling like that.
Yeah. No, it's the shirt off in the mosh pit. I don't like having someone's sweaty body slamming into you. I find that a bit. Oh no, keep your shirt on. I know it's hot, but I don't want your like sweaty body all over me.
Just it's lush, isn't it? And
yeah.
I don't know. It's just like if I can message to people in the metal community is focus on your personal hygiene. Buy deodorants and soaps. They're not expensive and they're not hard to use. But I do like the metal community. I've always felt generally more accepted. You do get your elements of dickheads, but I don't really see much of that. I think it's kind of a more accepting space of diverse culture, even though there's only now really being, there's a singer that isn't a white dude, and it isn't and it isn't sort of a novelty to people. It's just becoming normalized now.
Well, I think anything that's like where people see it as theirs. So again, heavy metal or like a video gaming or like tabletop gaming and things like that. If it's something that like mostly like white men as well, like will see it as their thing, you'll get like these little pockets of horrible sort of like right wingness in there. I think I think when you associate something as your identity, so people will be like, I'm a metalhead, that is my thing, I love metal, or I'm a video gamer, that's my thing, I am a video gamer. That is their identity. That's people get very like sort of weirdly gatekeeper and protective about it for no reason.
It's just like, this is my tree house, you can't come in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I've never understood that. I don't come from the most diverse place in Suffolk. I mean, they're only really just stopping burning women for witchcraft there. So, but it's. I've never understood that logic of right. We want all of just the same people with the same views, listening to the same style of music constantly. We don't want to add new elements. We don't want new kind of people with different backgrounds and views. We don't. I just, any kind of dilution of this pure thing that's metal. Like, if you don't listen to just like Metallica and Maiden and all of that, you're not a proper metal fan. And then the black metal community is even worse than that.
Yeah, well,
that's when
black
actual
metal
Nazis tend to come out.
Yeah. Yeah, black metal. I mean, I listen to a lot of black metal. But again, it's a proper breeding ground for that sort of thing. Like I always say, I hate the fact that if I'd like hear a black metal band I really like, I have to do a bit of research to make sure they're not Nazis, which I like kind of resent having to do that. Yeah, yeah. But there's some very good like left leaning and very left wing black metal out there as well.
Yeah. Like my friend gets very, very annoyed because he's a pagan, and he gets very, very annoyed about Nazi pagans, and a neo-pagan or whatever, just
Mm.
Nazis who like trees. I call them.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the National Socialist black metal. The ones that explicitly say it is usually crap, but like the ones that don't and leave it ambiguous and you have to Google it, that's when it becomes a bit, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned Bama supporting Slipknot. Isn't he, the singer of that band, come out and said some very dodgy stuff in the past, if I remember rightly?
What Nurgle from Behemoth, yeah.
Yeah.
He talked shit about Antifa, and then he tried to kind of play it off as he's this sort of daring, liberal,
well, that's what they
free
do.
thinker.
That's their tactic. They say,
Yeah.
"Oh no, I have a go at the right wing people and the left wing people," but they're very much focused on the left wing people. There's not much much criticism of the right from people like that.
Yeah, there's lots of memes about it. People who kind of appoint themselves as centrist, and they've got kind of this fantasy where they wank themselves off of like, oh, I'm the reasonable person in the room, fighting the excesses of the right and the left. But when push comes to shove, they tend to be a lot less critical of the right and tend to rag on the left more.
Yeah,
and
you don't see many Sargon of Akkad videos having a go at right-wing people.
No, no, you don't. And it just seems very, very bizarre to me because I understand, maybe not being as angered by more reasonable conservatives or more reasonable right-wing people, but not being able to tell the difference between the radical left and the radical right just seems like very willful ignorance to me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Like half these people are like, I want to wipe out all of the blacks and the Jews and the gays, and the other half is like, that's morally abhorrent. Maybe don't do that. And then some people going like, oh, I literally can't tell the difference.
Yeah, well, it's there's obviously a very fine line, isn't there? How can you say
that? Yeah. One of my favorite memes of all time, and I know this outs me as a very sad internet dweeb because I am. It was kind of the far right, like, oh, we want to put minorities in camps. And the left is like, no, don't put them in camps. And then centrists like, oh, you can have the camps, but 50% of the guards have to be female, or you have to reserve some of the leadership positions for women. And
yeah.
A lot of, well, in terms of the right kind of, or extreme right, they do tend to like to infiltrate any community. And what I've noticed is there's been a lot of things where, obviously, the Pepe the Frog is now a alt-right symbol. The OK sign is now an alt-right symbol. New Balance shoes, which I own and are very comfortable.
Is that an alt-right thing? Is it New Balance shoes?
Yeah, apparently they all started wearing New Balance shoes and having the sort of haircuts that I have because they're the few that suit my head,
Yeah, I mean, I'm going bald. I haven't got much choice other than to shave my head, really. So that's what right-wing people used to look like.
Yeah.
Now it's like the alt-right is more like
respectable.
Yeah, it's a bit more. They look a bit more like hipsters, don't they? The alt-right people. They're a bit more like Yeah,
even the Nazi movement has been gentrified.
Yeah, it's nothing sacred.
He's like, I just want equal opportunities for racists. I don't know what your take on this is, but I've never felt comfortable going, oh, can't do that, can't use that because it's a Nazi thing now. But that means like, oh, Nazis can just say anything's like a thing. Like,
yeah.
Looking at a bottle of Dermal cream, like eczema and stuff. They could start saying that's a Nazi thing. But the thing is, like, they're trying to infiltrate culture, So
well, yeah,
don't give them any
like,
ground. Don't
thing,
give
isn't
them
it?
anything. Just
Yeah.
tell them to fuck off.
Yeah, I get it, and I think they obviously use like symbols like that, so they don't have to open, so they don't have to wear a swastika. Basically, that is what it's there, isn't it? The Pepe the Frog thing, and all this stuff is that it's coding for them, isn't it? They know. So you see someone with a Pepe the Frog picture on Twitter or whatever, you know that they're one of you, almost, if that's what you're into.
They're signals. They're like they're like the patch jacket in the metal community almost.
Yeah, sort of. Or like I always say, like the metal band T-shirt is a thing, isn't it? When you like see someone with a metal band shirt, there's always that like, oh look, you've got something in common there, haven't you?
There's usually at least a sort of vaguely polite nod, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you get talking to those people, you have to make sure that they don't have really hideous right-wing views, because it does happen, and you're just like, oh, here we go.
Yeah, it's always a risk.
But I just don't. I think you've got to kind of be very, very firm with them. Obviously, there's kind of dog whistles which are so blatantly associated with that movement that you can't use them or say it. And when people are using it, it kind of, and especially how they're using it, it does give you an inclination of what they actually think. But the movement is so amorphous and in quite a constant state of flux that by the time it's been widely accepted that those things are alt-right dog whistles or hate symbols, that they've already changed it and started using something else.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, it's so they can like operate in their spaces with like knowing who is using a term that they would hate is a safe space for them, isn't it?
And it's quite ironic that those who go on about the triggered and overly sensitive people tend to be the most ridiculously oversensitive people you can come across. Yeah,
like I was saying about all these protests in America that are happening a few weeks ago with the people with their guns saying that they open up America, stop the lockdown because I want to go and get my hair cut. Like how can you like call someone a snowflake for being against like racism, but then literally go and protest the fact you can't go and get a haircut?
Yeah. It's just like, I'm willing to die to go in that Baskin Robbins,
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't, you can't accuse someone of being overly sensitive and then do that. I think
I've never really expected intellectual consistency from those people.
Well, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But there's been a lot of obviously. I was telling you before we went on air about Metalgate, where they tried to leap on, obviously, the blistering success of Gamergate of making people look like bellends. Yeah. And
Gamergate is
to own a PlayStation.
Well, Gamergate's an interesting thing because I'm not big into video games and stuff. It's not really my area, and I'm not a big like internet sort of. I don't use Twitter and stuff. I'm not really like in on all that. But like what I've read about it, like afterwards, it's sort of you think, because I mentioned again earlier, Sargon of Akkad, who is like a prolific right-wing YouTuber. He started because of Gamergate.
Failed UKIP candidate also.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, exactly. He went on to be in UKIP, and so you think, I think the effect that Gamergate had still has that sort of like knock on in the right wing, how they use the internet. Like, I think a lot of young men were like, is the right word, recruited. Yeah, that is the right word. Recruited into that thing because of Gamergate, because people were telling them, again, like I said earlier on, their identity, that, if you're a video gamer, that is your thing. And if someone is telling you, well, look, this woman who thinks that the games you love, that is your identity, a sexist, look, she's an idiot, all this, then they know exactly who to target and exactly who to like get into on their side. It's the same reasons why you get like the British National Party and or the National Front or EDL or whatever, they target certain towns and certain parts of towns, more like less affluent, more working class areas, because they know they're the people that they can tell them, oh look, you've been laid off your job because it's all these people, it's all the immigrants coming over. And if someone you don't know any better people are telling you that, a young guy, then yeah, they're not idiots. The people that do this, they're just wrong.
Yeah, I think that these kind of manufactured cultural issues, very much used to, because you can't. Most reasonable people won't go straight away to like full blown Nazi. You have to kind of wean them onto it,
Yes.
And like another thing is, if you're an avid, passionate, maybe not kind of insecure, a bit socially isolated or inept, or not much economic prospects, and then you start by going, one of your respites is under attack by this crazy group of feminists or whatever, or your very way of life is under threat by a few women by the fact that a few women play Animal Crossing in Minecraft or something like that. Yeah. And then it kind of snowballs. There's have you heard of the idea of the alt-right pipeline?
Yes.
Yeah, where you start off with kind of centre-right figures.
But you start with that, the sort of Gamergate videos, and that will lead you down into the depths of it. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, the Jewish question and all of that sort of stuff.
There was the term they used, the Great Replacement is a term they use, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, which just isn't a thing. And luckily, kind of, because there was a period where YouTube was very much just pungent with it, and any sort of like vague kind of, even if I watched like a Joe Rogan Experience with Tyson Fury, it would be my recommended be spammed by like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, Milo Yiannopoulos, and she's like, no, I just wanted to listen to boxing.
Well, that's how it works, though, is that the algorithms and stuff, it's and the autoplay on YouTube, again, you could literally, again, like you said, you're watching a Joe Rogan video, who he does commonly have like alt-right people on there, and he puts himself as like a centrist, doesn't he? I guess Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I don't know much about him personally, but he has people like Milo Yiannopoulos on his show, doesn't he? And like more right wing people. So I guess the algorithms are going to go that way, and then you autoplay, and the next thing you know, you could be watching pure like hate fuel.
Yeah. I think Rogan, I think, is politically, obviously he admits he's not an expert, he's politically quite naive, because personally he's obviously very in support of a lot. He came out in support of Bernie, and he's supports a lot of left-wing policies personally, but I think he's quite naive in the fact that you can have a debate or a reasonable discussion with fundamentally dishonest people who are quite literally paid to lie. Their livelihood is based on propagating racist and bigoted lies. So, and you can't reason with people who aren't being honest with you. And and by kind of debating these people, unless they already have a big platform that you can't ignore them, you're just making that seem to people like an acceptable part of discourse or an acceptable things to think and say.
I'm not thinking, because he has, like, his podcast is massive, isn't it? His podcast is huge.
Yeah.
He has, I think there's a lot to be said, maybe quite dangerously, that he is giving people like that a platform.
Yeah.
And probably would be best for him not to, because I don't think he goes in there like tearing them down or like debunking anything, does he? I think, which I get his approach is to go at it a more rational, is probably the word someone would use, but to be like,
or a less confrontational style,
Yeah, which I understand. I totally understand, because you can't just go in guns blazing all the time. You've got to sort of like, again, also I guess maybe the thinking is people like that, you give them enough rope and they hang themselves almost. But
yeah, like the Andrew Marr kind of style or something like that.
yeah, but I think like someone like Milo Yiannopoulos is obviously a charismatic person because he has to have that certain charisma to be able to be so popular and successful in what he does.
He's not so much anymore. He's like basically
yeah.
financially destitute, thankfully.
Yeah, but again, people like that. Again, I'm not as up to date with it all, but there's probably someone who is doing the same stuff now, isn't there?
Yeah, someone they're a dime a dozen. Once one of them gets found out or dealt with, then another forms. It's like a hydra, really. But it's one of the few good things that came out of Joe Rogan interviewing is that he got too toxic because of that experience by basically him saying that he thinks, older men having sexual relations with having paedophilic relations is fine and can actually be beneficial to the children. Yeah, that's what Milo
who
said.
That?
Yeah.
Milo Yiannopoulos said that. Okay.
Yeah, that's why he got kind of cancelled, and even the Conservatives were like,
yeah,
nah.
yeah. I mean, again, I think part of his stick was to be like controversial, wasn't it? I think that's all he really wanted to do was like get a reaction. And I guess if that is your goal, and you're already saying horrible racist stuff and sexist stuff, then you've got to up it, haven't you? If people get like used to you being a misogynist and a racist, then you've got to up it, haven't you?
You've got to push it further, and it's the same with Katie Hopkins. Like people were fine with her being really, 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 really horrible until she started literally calling for like the final solution and shit. So to like the refugee crisis. So, and it's very obvious what that means. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even that isn't even subtext, is it? That is just like, that's just using the same language.
Exactly. It's not even disguised in metaphor or flowery rhetoric. That is just explicitly genocide.
Mm-hmm. Katie Hopkins is a weird one as well, though. It's a similar thing, isn't it? Where like, again, I guess because like. Being right wing and being sort of alt right and like far right, you're obviously more conservative, and a big thing of that is you're entrepreneurial almost. You know what I mean? Like the left don't have that same like that same like what's the entrepreneurial spirit, I guess. Like they do obviously, but in a different way, where it's all about making money for the right, really. And I guess. Katie Hopkins, she was like started on The Apprentice, right? She was on The Apprentice.
Yeah.
And then she obviously just found her like niche, and it's obviously worked out well for her because I'm sure she makes a lot of money doing it.
You find a gap in the market.
Her main goal. Yeah. It's same with what's that actor that recently Lawrence Fox. He said something ridiculous on Question Time. That white privilege doesn't exist or whatever. The typical sort of bollocks that people say. Yeah. And then he has used that to like create his little thing of the PC snowflakes cancelling everyone, which they're not. You can't name anyone that's actually been cancelled, right? Like if you really think about it, like
not people that didn't have it coming,
But even people that definitely deserve it haven't been cancelled. You know what I mean? Like the example I always use is Roman Polanski is still making films. He's been given Oscars since he was not like accused of anything, convicted of like having sex with an underage person.
Exactly, and he just fucked off to Switzerland and.
You know what I mean? It's not like his career hasn't suffered, has it?
Yeah, and people still just fly out to Europe to work with him, and one of the liberal feminists' favourite people, Meryl Streep, wrote like a massive signed an open letter and spoke publicly about having him be given clemency to accept his Oscar. And I don't understand why people still take what she says about politics seriously when she's like, I'm all right with someone fucking a 14-year-old up the arse as long as they make good films. You know, that's basically her ideology.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. But again, it's hard to actually pinpoint like where anyone, even like Louis C.K. People always say that he's been cancelled, but he's still working. He's doing all right, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? Louis C.K. is not like he's not struggling, is he?
But yeah,
Like,
all he was
Louis
minted
C.K.
already, and all he had to really do is fuck off to France for a bit with his new, much younger French girlfriend, which obviously sounds like a fate worse than death, doesn't it? That sounds awful.
What, having to go to France with Louis C.K.? Yeah.
Yeah, that bit.
But
I was someone offered me a gig supporting him, and I was half tempted to go.
Was that yeah, because didn't he get booked for some gigs over here fairly recently, and they got cancelled, obviously. And I've sort of contradicted myself. I suppose some of his gigs have been cancelled, but he hasn't been cancelled.
Exactly. he still earns a living, just not to the same extent that he did, or profile that he did previously. And part of me was like, go, and then get street cred by wanking at him.
Yeah, well, yeah. Like if Louis C.K. like announced a tour, like an arena tour or whatever, like he used to, it would still sell out.
Oh yeah, he sells out arenas and and he gets massive ovations to massive ovations.
He does these secret gigs and stuff in like comedy clubs and that, and it's like
most people are happy to see him there, aren't they?
Yeah. I'd be fucked off if I went to a comedy gig and he turned up. I mean, I hadn't paid. If I'd paid to go and see like a comedy show and he was like secretly on the bill, I'd be furious.
Yeah. I don't know how I'd react. I'd sort of be curious in the sort of way that you want to watch something horrible, happening.
Yeah.
But I honestly couldn't say what I'd do. Because sometimes I'd want to think that I do the right thing, but I don't know. So part of me is like, when I'm not on stage, I can be paralyzed for drawing attention to myself, and I don't want to walk out.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, but I think we discussed, we've got Metalgate comedy. We were talking about another kind of phenomenon where obviously there's been people saying like Magic the Gathering and Dungeon the Dragon feminists are taking over. And a final sort of bit that I thought would add a bit of levity. You were saying that phenomenon has extended to the Warhammer community, and there's quite a lot of it in Warhammer 5000.
Warhammer 40,000, yeah.
40,000. Oh yeah, the Space Marines.
Sorry to be that guy on there.
Yeah.
Actually, you'll find it's Warhammer 40,000, yeah. Yeah, well, I'm big into like tabletop gaming and stuff, and that it's like I have been since I was young. And I think it just goes back to what I was saying about Gamergate in general, is that when people see, a lot of people see Dungeons and Dragons as their thing, don't they? That's their identity almost.
Yeah.
Like I said about heavy metal and video games, and like Warhammer 40,000, and you said Magic the Gathering as well. I think people see that as, if it's something when it's their main identity, then the right know who to target in that, don't they?
Yeah.
Again, you're a 14-year-old guy that is being told that women don't want to sleep with them because feminists are trying to ban video games, which they're not. Or they're trying to ruin Warhammer somehow. I don't know how, but by adding a woman in the game or something, I don't know. But, so I mean, like, when you really like break it down, like how, like Magic the Gathering, how are feminists, like, is the reasoning of a feminist ruining Magic the Gathering?
Right. I don't know, because the thing is, when beyond the vitriol and the quite nuts rhetoric, they don't really offer many substantial examples, and a lot of this fear is this stuff is very, very irrational, because of course it is, because it's fucking ridiculous. And I think a lot of it comes down to not just obviously quite probably more deeply your very good points about identity and such, but another thing is these are the hobbies we're talking about are not widely socially accepted as being very, very cool, are they? You know?
Yeah.
No. Even in the odd sense of kind of like chic geek and like kind of the nerd aesthetic, and people enjoying this stuff who definitely used to bully those sort of people at school. But they're just probably a bit intimidated by women, especially confident women, and they don't know.
I think that is part of it. Definitely. I think computer games is a few years ahead of its like acceptability than say like Magic the Gathering or Dungeons and Dragons or Warhammer. Yeah. And I think even maybe like 20 years ago, when like first PlayStation or whatever was out, that was when gaming started to become like video gaming anyway, started to become more popular and mainstream. And you think now video gaming it's not even, I would say it's not even seen as like a nerdy thing anymore, really.
It's a commodity. It's a luxury good now. I don't know many people who don't at least game on their phone, and I know some people treat that as heresy, but that's count.
Video gaming, Yeah, my mum plays games on her phone,
Yeah.
But my mum would, you would never have said my mum is a video gamer, but she would,
and I think solitaire or Candy Crush.
But that's the same. It's the same thing, And I think, of course it is.
One of the first games on the original consoles was Pong, and that's just like bloop bloop. That's still you're still a gamer.
Yeah,
you're still gaming, even if you're not. Yeah. But it's a weird one, and I think that these people need to maybe, because a lot of them get very, very angry that they don't get to meet women, or women don't notice them and don't pay attention to them. But then when those women literally come to their communities and want to socialize with them and talk to them, they get angry.
And I think a big part of it is that, like, if you look at films and how like representation is in films, is very different to computer games, and then that's very different to how it is in like Warhammer or Magic the Gathering or whatever. And it's because they're just films, and TV is an older medium. So it's sort of like video games is catching up now. Then next it will be the board games and the like Warhammer stuff. Like the more popular something gets, the more it's going to have to sort of become more inclusive and have better representation in like the artwork in the books, or what miniatures are produced or whatever. And then I think when there is a genuine like change happening, then you're going to get that sort of resistance to it.
Yeah.
So there's a weird thing where like recently they've just announced, like Games Workshop, the company that make Warhammer, have just announced that they're doing like a new edition of Warhammer 40,000. They're going to do some new models for it and stuff, typical sort of thing. But they're on Twitch and they showed a cover of one of the new like novels, like the new fiction books, and the picture on the front, it was like one of their Space Marine characters, but it was a black guy. And then the comments on Twitch just blew up with like racism. And the admins were very good at deleting them. But it was so weird. There was about 70,000 people watching the stream. And the comment section just suddenly turned into this mad, like, racist, like, not every, again, it was obviously a small minority of people in there doing it, but they're
a very loud minority, aren't they?
Yeah, as soon as they saw that, they just went bang, and it went mad. And I think the admins or the people that work for the company were very good at like deleting stuff and getting it out of the way. But that was mad. and
totally unrealistic to have one black person in space, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And they have these weird like conversations about, well, actually this book here said that Space Marines can't be this and that and this. It's like, but it's all made up, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like,
It's
Similar
not
thing
real. The law changes all the time.
Yeah,
People just retcon
yeah,
stuff and change it all the
yeah,
time if it doesn't fit the new
yeah.
release.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, does it? You're playing with toy soldiers, it's not.
Yeah.
It's
And
very weird.
I don't get it. It's baffling to me. It's like it sort of seems like a recurrence of the when John Boyega, who's someone I really
Yes.
admire.
The last couple of days has been fairly amazing, hasn't he?
Yes, he's been great. He got cast as Finn, obviously, in the new Star Wars trilogy, and it's just like, oh my god, there is one black stormtrooper, just
Yeah. Exactly the same. Yeah, exactly the same. It's like, but then people will go, well, but they said in this film that stormtroopers are clones. But then, like, literally in that film, they explain that they're not in the new film. Do you know what I mean? They're not the same things as the old Star Wars characters.
Yeah, because there was only a limited amount of them, and obviously, if you know anything about the universe where the clones were made, obviously Jango Fett was killed, and then the cloning facilities were destroyed. So there was only a very, very few of the original clones left. So that's not a very hard one to explain away.
Yeah. And again, it's Star Wars. Do you know what I mean? There's films like, you think there's more like weird, crazy aliens in those films than there are like black people, like actual real life living black people. So you think probably still not the best sort of representation, is there? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Like you're totally fine with the little green man that flips around and does all that stuff, and the saggy bollock that shoots lightning out of his fingers, but not a couple of black people.
But that's because people are being told, there's these, as we said, the sort of YouTube people that are telling them that it's because they're trying to change it all to be politically correct.
Like as part of this cultural Marxism war.
Oh yeah, there's another one of the other buzzwords they love, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then they say cultural Marxism, but they don't. Either they understand the history and they support it, or they don't know what they're talking about. But
yeah, a bit of both, I think, for some of them.
Yeah. I think a lot of fandoms have a lot of the identitarianism of political sects and movements and religious movements and get just as vitriolic upset.
I don't suppose you could be into Star Wars and sort of like be far right almost, because it's like the villains in Star Wars are like a fascist government. So
they're literally called the Stormtroopers.
Yeah. Again, it's Star Wars. It's not like it's subtle. You know what I mean? I understand. Yeah.
I don't know how you can really miss that messaging if unless you're very, very dumb or you're
willfully ignorant. Ignorant to get a very specific sort of worldview out there.
Very disingenuous as well. But
I'm a big fan of 2000 AD comics and stuff, Judge Dredd and all that, and which are like, they're rooted in like political satire. Basically, Judge Dredd is a satire of like 80s like Thatcherism and Reaganism and stuff. And I saw someone sent me a thing knowing that I'm a big fan of Judge Dredd on Facebook the other day, where someone had tweeted as a response to them supporting Black Lives Matter, saying, "Oh, 2000 AD has been my solace for like over 40 years, and they've never once had a political agenda until now."
Oh my God!
How can you miss literally like I said about Star Wars? It's not subtext. That is like the text of 2000 AD is that it is political.
Oh, man. And if you can't really miss the obvious commentary on not just the Thatcherism and Reaganism, but how obvious it's about police brutality.
Well, yeah, everything. Yeah, and again, because it's been going for so long, Judge Dredd, and there's so many different like story arcs that are about certain things of the time. It reflects like the good sci-fi should reflects the time that is produced. Like, and you go back, I can't understand how someone could misread 2018.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's so on the
Yeah.
nose it punches you in the face, and
Exactly.
and then you start to say that wasn't a punch, it was a hug.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But we're coming up to the end of the Hoodcast hour, unfortunately. But I just wanted to thank you for
Oh, no,
being
thank you
on.
for having me. Thank you very
And
much. Really appreciate it. It's nice to have a chat.
yeah, it's a good laugh. Any sort of human interaction at the moment is
Yes.
great, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Definitely. Yeah.
just to end it, is there, obviously I'll put the links in the video, but is there anything that you would like to plug just before we leave?
Yeah, I've got a few things. So I do a few podcasts myself. So I do a podcast of another comic called Thom Barret called The Men with Two Brains. So if you search for the Men with Two Brains podcast, it's on the normal spaces, Spotify and all the normal podcast places. So you find it on there. And we've also, during the lockdown, we've been doing like live streams on Facebook of playing the Fighting Fantasy Choose Your Own Adventure books. If you want to watch us do them, we do them on Monday nights at 7:30. So if you're looking for something to do on a Monday evening, then you can find that on Facebook if you just search for the Men with Two Brains podcast. And there, or you can also watch all the other ones we've done on there as well. Then I do a podcast about horror films as well called Death Nerve, where I talk to like comedians and musicians and just interesting people about their favourite horror films. Yeah, that's probably it.
That sounds like you're a man of many hats, Rob.
Yeah, I'm not very good at advertising myself. That's the problem. I've just got too many things. A jack of all trades, master of none, as they say.
Yeah, and social media just goes over my head too.
Oh yeah, I'm a bit of a Luddite. I can't really. I'm not very good with computers. I've got better since lockdown because I've had to use Skype, which is like an old thing anyway. But I've got to,
I've only just heard of Zoom, and now people are using Discord, and I don't understand.
Yeah, I had Discord on my computer because people were saying, "Oh, you can play like role-playing games over it." I was like, "I've had it on my computer for ages and never used it until lockdown," because people are like, "Oh, we're chatting on Discord. All right, I'll get involved."
And I haven't managed to have, because my mate was like, "Oh, it's a lot easier to use than Skype or Zoom," and it isn't.
Yeah,
I've got used to two things already. I can't be asked for the third. I will remain ignorant.
Like when you get a new phone, yeah. Like when you get a new phone and you're used to the old one, but everyone's telling you the new one's better. You still can't get your head around it.
That's fairly apt. So, thank you for being with us, Rob.
Thank you for having me.
I've been your host, Aaron Hood. This has been another Hoodcast. As all, stay safe, stay hydrated, and stay the fuck inside. Thank you very much. Goodbye.